Hello, my people, and welcome to another Waste Not Wednesdays. It's your Negro with aptitude and host of the Blackboard, Mickey Lee. Hope your over the hump day is going well and that you have been doing well despite all of the chaos that's going on around the world. Thank you for spending a little time with me on Waste Not Wednesdays as we prepare our mind, body, and soul for the sweeping changes currently occurring in the United States and around the world, and for those that are yet to come. Well, as you can see, I'm asking, what's for dinner? The reason I'm asking what's for dinner is if you're not yet aware of it, you certainly will soon be. Food shortages are already here, and they will continue to mount until there is a global famine. So this week's Waste Not Wednesdays is dedicated to the topic of fasting and how we should use that practice to prepare our mind, body, and souls for food shortages so that we are not put in a vulnerable position where we make decisions based only on our stomachs. If you've been checking out the headlines, then you know that the food shortages are global. What you may not know is the cause of those food shortages. Now, it is true that the response to the coronavirus has shut down supply chains, which means that those who produce food, whether it be produce or animal resources like beef or pork or turkey, ducks, etc., they are not able to do business as usual, and therefore the shipments are not coming through because of the virus. Now, that's what they're telling us in the news. But if you've been following my channel for a while, then you know that I have actually reported on these food shortages for the last couple of years. And when you do a little research, you will find that though some of the crop losses and the devastation to the food sources are actual acts of God through hurricanes, floods, even droughts, as many are the acts of man. Recently, pig farmers in Nigeria, for example, are reporting the swine fever or the swine flu. Again, also in China, there is a pandemic with a new swine flu strain, which has resulted in them culling or killing millions and millions of pigs. What? Again? Then you have chicken processing companies who are culling birds. Again, that means killing the birds by the millions because the birds have produced too many eggs. If you don't believe me, go ahead and do a little research on your own and you will find out what I'm saying is true. But it's not just the animals that are being affected. As I mentioned, produce is being affected. In Montana, billions of pounds of potatoes have been shoved into a giant hole and covered over to rot. Why? Because the potato farmers say they can't get their potatoes to market. Now, in an age, information age like what we have, that just sounds absolutely ludicrous. Not only does it sound ludicrous with the potatoes, but of course with the chicken farmers and some of the others. Now, I'm not a farmer and I don't claim to be an expert, but when you have people starving to death in Venezuela to the point where they've eaten all the cats and the dogs, they've even attacked the zoo animals, and many of the people are currently eating rats. it would seem to me that pandemic or no pandemic, and especially when you see, and I'm going to tackle this video this weekend, so help me, I'm going to walk you through this pandemic, which many, including myself, call a plandemic, and you will see that the numbers of fatalities simply do not justify the entire shutdown of the world's economy and food sources. But I digress. When you have people starving to death, as they are in Venezuela, and instead of sterilizing planes or trucks or whatever needs to have happened and having Venezuela purchase those potatoes, purchase the chickens, purchase the pigs, purchase the beef, etc., or trade something that Venezuela has so that it can feed its people, these food sources are being destroyed. Now, there are many who feel that the farmers have no choice. I am not a person who feels that that's entirely the case. What I do feel is that there is one group of people who are in charge of producing the food, and that group of people's mindsets and thought processes are the ones that are taken as gospel, and no other type of thinking is introduced. Now, I am happy to say that at least with the potato farmers, they have started using social media and reaching out to regional areas and getting potatoes to other communities in the area, so that's good. But the same could be done for a lot of these other crops and a lot of the other animal resources that are just simply being wasted. Perhaps you're thinking, well, Mickey, is this really a big deal? I mean, I just go to the supermarket and I buy more food. Well, if you've been to the supermarkets lately, you do recognize there are holes in the shelves. You also recognize that there are now mandatory limits on the number of things that you can buy. For example, dairy products. This is because millions and millions of cows were destroyed in the floods of 2017 and 2018. Since the gestation period for a cow, I believe, is 12 months, or no, it's 9 months or something of this nature, but it takes a full 18 months for the cow to reach the size for processing, to become your favorite steaks and ground beef and etc. This means that the cows that were destroyed in 2017 and 2018 have only now become beginning to be replaced. The other issue is that the crops of grain that are normally used to feed the cows have also been devastated since 2015. I have on the screen here a crop loss map that has been posted and put together by the Ice Age Farmer. The Ice Age Farmer is a YouTube channel that has been reporting on the grand solar minimum, which is what we are currently experiencing with the sun not giving off as many sunspots, which has to do with the level of temperature. It also has to do with the electromagnetic waves, and it has to do with the general life force, if you will, that it gives to the globe, so that crops can be raised. Now, you can do some very simple research on the grand solar minimum to find out more about it. This is not the first one, but each time it happens, the results are devastating. So when you add to the grand solar minimum and the crop losses that have already been occurring because the earth is not on its axis anymore, it's not on the same axis it was on, say, 50 years ago or even 40 years ago, because the crop losses or the growing seasons have shortened because of the grand solar minimum, and even the areas on earth that were once fertile are not anymore. They're becoming drought zones, etc., whereas conversely, you now have areas of the desert. Go ahead and look at the Middle East, for example. You have areas that have long been desert that are now flourishing. So all of this is due to the fact that the earth is off its axis, the sun is no longer giving off sunspots, and the electromagnetic field is also weakened. So there's a number of other things, and these are all, in God's hands. But I want you to take a close look at this map because it shows you that the crop losses have been happening for years, and they're happening all over the globe. So even without the pandemic, we already were headed towards food shortages. Now, since you all know, or probably will know as you look into more of my videos, that my life frame is based on the Bible, I'm encouraging you not to fear, but to put your trust in the Lord, to read His Word, to look at the news now through the biblical lens, see how much of it matches up, and prepare your soul, which is the most important part of you. Prepare your soul to meet God face to face, and you do that by asking for forgiveness and taking the free offer of salvation through Jesus Christ. And once you have done that, which only takes a few heartfelt minutes to have that happen, and then you live those biblical principles the rest of your life here, then you need to prepare your body for these changes. And that starts in the mind. You need to understand that God has already warned us that these food shortages and famines would be coming. Then, once you accept that, you start to look for tips to help you adjust your body accordingly. And it's a lot easier to do this when you determine to adjust your body rather than someone telling you you can no longer eat this food or that food. And that's where we're going with this video. So again, the purpose of this video is to look at fasting as a strategy that we can use to prepare our bodies for the coming food shortages, or actually intensified food shortages, because we already have food shortages now. And these food shortages will eventually become global famine. The reason we want to utilize this strategy now of fasting is because we don't want our flesh, in particular our stomach, to make us vulnerable into making a decision that will cost us our eternal souls. And you might say, well, Mickey, that's a little heavy, isn't it? Is it? I encourage you to grab a Bible, and if you don't have one, then go online and use your cell phone, your laptop, your iPad, whatever, and read the story of Esau and Jacob. Now, Esau is referred to as a profane person. A profane person is one who has no reverence for spiritual things, no reverence for things that are of sanctity, that are sanctified. This is a person that lives primarily in base morals. So that is where the term profanity comes from. So he does not recognize, is not able to discern things of high value or things of sanctity. So he was tricked out of his birthright by his younger brother Jacob. Now they were twins, they were fraternal twins, but Esau came out first. So as the oldest child of Isaac, he was supposed to get the birthright. But because he made rash decisions, he sold his birthright for a bowl of stew. This profound biblical recording will come to play in a lot of people's lives in these last days, and especially as they begin to increase government control over who has access to food and who doesn't. This may begin with the vaccines, for example. If you can't prove that you've taken a vaccine, you may not be allowed to shop in a supermarket, even if you're wearing a mask. That is not far-fetched. Or maybe if you have not taken a vaccine, you may be forced to stay in a certain region or not be allowed to travel from city to city. And you may find that people who have not taken vaccines are all herded into the same area, and then food supplies cut off. There are a number of things that could happen, and we can surmise this to be true because so far the government knows the food shortages are coming, and yet they are not promoting pandemic gardens. They are not promoting people growing their own food or learning small animal husbandry. And these are things that could easily be done to help avoid any further food shortages or famine in the United States and globally. Now, there are a few countries like Sweden who are taking steps, but I'm keeping my commentary primarily to the United States. So the bottom line is we don't want our stomach to write a check that our soul has to pay. Once again, there's a huge biblical historical basis for considering the strategy of intentional fasting. We know that Joseph saved the people of Egypt and Canaan from famine by storing up grain and food. Now, the people were still hungry, but they didn't starve to death because of this. Daniel and his companions ate vegetables and drank water so that they could show their faithfulness to God and not defile their bodies with the wine and the food that the pagan king was enjoying. So again, it's not that the Bible is saying you could not drink wine or eat food, meat, etc., etc. Daniel and his companions did this as a response to the edict that people were supposed to worship that king, and they weren't going to do that. Fasting should be a strong weapon in our spiritual arsenal already. The Bible tells us that many spirits or demons cannot depart people unless other people are praying or fasting for that person. There are many things that God will move on if people are fasting. And it certainly shows that we are determined to be masters over our flesh rather than to have our flesh master us. Furthermore, we know for sure that famine will come in the end times. It has been foretold or reported in the Bible, and we can see it happening right now. That said, there are lots of other reasons that we should automatically be fasting. Number one, it helps with weight loss, it helps with brain clarity, it helps reduce cholesterol, and there are other medical reasons that you can look up. So now we're going to discuss how we can start to make intentional fasting part of our lives. If you are handling this time correctly, especially this pandemic time, and you are working from home or otherwise at home with your children more than you normally would be, I really do hope you are taking time and setting a set time to talk with them about God, talk with them about Jesus, talk with them about the Holy Spirit, that you're reading the scriptures to them each day, that you're helping them understand why it is important for them to give their allegiance to Jesus Christ, for them to ask forgiveness of their sins, which, are going to be relatively minimal depending on how what the age of the child is. But the importance is the conversation needs to be had about what is coming in these end times, and that the whole family is able to prepare together. In this way, your family is made less vulnerable to the things that are going to be coming at you from the government, your neighbors, other family members. Remember, from the smallest to the largest, from the richest to the poorest, from the most famous to the most obscure, every single one of us will leave this body shell, this body housing, and will have to present ourselves from before the Lord. If we have not taken the gift of salvation from Jesus Christ, even someone as young as 3 years old, explain who Jesus is to the level that they can understand, and ask them whether or not they believe him, okay, whether they believe in him, and you continually have this conversation with your children. And then fasting and food storage, all of this should be a family affair. Before you begin fasting, seek the Lord on what kind of fast you are to do. Perhaps you will be led into simply skipping a meal or two every day, one set day a week. Maybe you will be drinking but not eating. Maybe you will be giving up meat but not giving up produce. Maybe you will fast for 24 hours with water only, or 24 hours with no water and no food. Maybe you will work up to 2 or 3 days with no water and no food. I have been at the point where I used to be able to do multiple multi-day fasts with no food and water. Every single person's body is different, and you need to take into account what your body is dealing with, also what your age. The important thing is to give your body over to the Lord so that he can help you prepare for what he knows will be coming in your particular life. The important thing is to treat your body as a potential, I hate to say it, but enemy, because that's what it is, that you need to subdue, so that your soul is not left vulnerable because you decided to take the mark of the beast so you could get something to eat for your children. This is going to be a real life situation. Okay? All right. So, first, seek the Lord's counsel on what kind of fast you are to do. This may change over time, but at least what should you be doing now? The second thing is, deal with any medical issues you might be dealing with before you embark on the fast. You don't want to make a situation worse. Ease into fasting. For most people, just the thought of going hungry makes us hungry. Now, for those people in the world that are always hungry, it's a whole different ball game. And my bet is before it's over with, and I can already see some of the signs of it happening, the people in the regions of the world that have known droughts, that have known famine for generations, etc., they're going to start to see more and more food supplies open up as the growing zones, as they are called, shifts. Whereas people in the so-called first world, who are used to just going to the supermarket and getting whatever they want to eat, we already can see that is becoming less and less. So it's going to be more of a shock for those of us who live in the quote-unquote first world. Again, work your way up. Maybe you need to skip just one meal, or maybe you'll need to skip a certain type of food, or maybe you'll start to, fast for 12 hours a day, or whatever it is, but ease into it and start working your way up. Record your feelings or responses. Maybe you may keep a diary of it, and just write down a few thoughts. Were you extra cranky? Were you having issues after an hour? Were you attacked with a whole lot of hunger pains? Were you, etc., etc.? As much as we like to think of this as the physical alone, remember, once Satan understands that you are trying to give your life and body over to the Lord to prepare for what's coming, he's going to use that body against you. He already is right now for those people who are not saved. Okay? And so if you have issues like being cranky, if you have issues like headaches, if you're having issues like, after 45 minutes, you're like, what? I thought I had been fasting for a day. Then ask the Lord to help you and shore you up as you fast. Give the fast as an offering to the Lord. Ask Him to help you with this fast. Ask Him to help you gain discipline over your body. I will tell you right now, I'm trying to gain discipline over mine, and it has nothing to do with a fast. I just eat too much. I eat too much sugar, and I just eat too much. And people would say, well, Mickey, you look pretty thin and you look fit. Yes, but I'm still about 30 pounds overweight. And so that's just eating too much. And then finally, make fasting a routine part of your life from now on. Why? So as the government shifts again, and we're already seeing some of it. If you're paying attention, you're starting to see some of it. You're starting to see the propaganda, for example. People who don't wear masks outside are beginning to be looked at severely, like by their neighbors. And some neighbors will even say something. You're a potential health threat and all of this other stuff. So, and then eventually the government will act on that. The reason that you want to make fasting a part of your regular life, not just your spiritual life, but your physical life, is so that you have control over your body, and your body you minimize. Now, Satan can only do, we learned that from the book of Job, Satan can only do what the Lord allows him to do. But by actively participating in the subjugation of your body in this particular way around food, you lose the fear of being hungry. You lose the fear of being hungry. You lose the fear of dying because you're hungry. You lose the fear of somebody pushing you into doing something that would cost you your soul because you're hungry. I really want to encourage you to get started on that strategy because things are changing rapidly, as we can see. And I believe, in no more than a year tops, they will change to what they call contactless money and things of that nature. And you will find that how you normally purchase food and all this kind of stuff is going to change. So I really want you to have that strategy. You and the Lord worked out that strategy for yourself, for your family, so that you can withstand the attacks. And especially, those of you who have children, because it's going to be very traumatic, when your children are hungry and you feel like you will take any measure to get them something to eat. But we must remember at all times that we are not humans having a spiritual experience or choosing to have a spiritual experience. We really are spirits that are having a human experience. So I hope that helps you